Hello everyone and welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast Russian Grand Prix review. Valtteri Bottas won. Lewis Hamilton did not. He did not equal Michael Schumacher's win record as was expected by a lot of people coming into the weekend because he was given 2 5-second penalties for illegal practice starts before the race, and that dropped him out of contention. So Valtteri Bottas won. Max Verstappen came second and Hamilton was third. I'm here with Freddie Coates and Nigel Chu, as usual, all up in Sheffield now. How are you guys? What do you think of the race?
Well, I'm sure you know how Freddie is because he's right next to you, Adam.
More for the podcast listeners, the recap that we had on last race review.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I'm all right, yeah. It was a weird race, wasn't it? It was one before the race started, kind of thing. It was a bit strange.
That's a nice way to phrase it, really. It did seem a bit strange that when they said Hamilton was under investigation, I felt a bit deflated, and just because, I mean, yeah, it's not the same result as we're used to, but it's still the same 3 on the podium, and it felt like the race that could have been, which was already set up to be relatively intriguing with Hamilton starting on the soft tyres comparatively to Verstappen and Bottas's mediums. I personally thought that could be a little bit more different to a normal race, but it became just a coast for Bottas.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm a bit sceptical about the penalties. I mean, 2 5-second time penalties for that. I know rules are rules, but it seems a little bit harsh to me, I feel. I'm not... I don't know.
When it's in the regulations and safety grounds, it's going to be slam dunk of a penalty. And when you look at where Hamilton was, at least for one of the pit lane starts, the one right at the end of the fast lane before it basically goes onto the track, what really showed in the live feed was you had, I think it was Stroll and Giovinazzi coming past him really quite fast. And for him to be stationary there, it's a bit... That doesn't really sit right. But for the other, I don't think it was worth 2 5 seconds. I don't know what the other violation was.
He did it twice, didn't he?
But the one he did previously was what everyone else would do, I thought.
Yeah, that's what caught me out. And I think I read during the race that Hamilton did ask for the second penalty, the worst one, whether he could do the start there, and the team said yes. So
yeah, they did.
I think it's partly the team's fault as well, not just Lewis on this one.
There's 2 Mercedes penalties that are kind of blamed on the team in 3 races, compared to Monza with another pit lane related penalty as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think it could potentially be dangerous, and if there is a collision, you could have a really bad aeroplane crash with the speed differentials there. So I can see why it's in the rules, and I can see why they enforced it and don't kind of want to go kind of lenient on it, or giving people the benefit of the doubt on it.
Yeah, if he stopped at like turn 3 and did it, then everyone would be like, well, that's stupid. Yeah. And it's the equivalent of he's basically a metre off the track in a way.
Do we think
if that happened?
Yeah, you go.
If that happened in practice, what do you think should have happened? Like a grid penalty, do you reckon? Or?
Based on the precedent now, I think a grid penalty. But if there hadn't been any penalty previously put down, I would have thought it would have been sort of a hefty fine, like an unsafe release in practice.
Yeah. Do we think that Hamilton would have won if it wasn't for the penalty? I mean, he was on, as we've already alluded to, he was on the soft tyres to start with compared to Hamilton and Verstappen and Bottas who were on the mediums. Do we think that it would have changed the result?
I mean, the easy thing to say is no, because he was finished 20 seconds behind, but I'm pretty sure he would have anyway because of track position and stuff, and he's able to stretch the tyres. And I really just don't see Bottas as a driver who's going to overtake Albon, because I can't remember a time he's done it. So I would highly doubt he would have done it on Sunday in Russia. So I think Hamilton would have won. It would have been a bit more difficult than usual, but I think he would definitely would have won.
I think it would have been a bit like Kota last year, actually. I think it would have been quite close. at the end. Dakota last year, they went on different strategies, and Bottas pit later on and came back at Hamilton later on and won the race with a simple move on track. And I think looking at the how early Hamilton had to pit, and that was, if there wasn't a safety car, it would be much earlier. So there were variables that fell into Hamilton's favour that could have also fallen into Bottas' favour and so on. And I think if it had been a straightforward race in terms of no safety car, Mercedes leading from the front, I think it would have been closer for Bottas because he could have a faster minimum speed across laps, whereas Hamilton had to nurse tyres so much more than Bottas, I think, personally.
I think it was the slam dunk of the starting on the soft kind of already made his strategy a bit, kind of a bit harder to work. But then it was kind of adding that with the 10-second penalty is just, kind of was what counted him out. We don't know how it would have gone if he'd been able to be on the mediums for it. We'll never know, but that could have kind of have a bit of an effect. Bottas did make a move on Hamilton though. It was quite an exciting start where he tried to go around the outside of turn 2, kind of looking at previous starts where, Silverstone springs to mind, where he kind of backed out at turn 1 and Spa as well. Then it was, it looked like he was going to make a decent effort, and he kind of got half ahead, but then just ran a bit wide onto the curb on the exit, and then kind of going around turn 3 was compromised there. So that's kind of, it's good that he's showing a bit more fight. Do you think that's kind of something he's going to be trying to do going forward, or is it kind of a one-off thing?
I don't think Bottas was any different to usual, to be honest. That's my opinion.
I kind of agree with that. The move was on because he was considerably side by side. It's not the kind of Bottas's moves that he doesn't really go for. Like the Silverstone one, he was half alongside. Whereas with this, he was definitely alongside and was on the racing line. So have more grip to brake. And I think that just gave him a bit more of a simpler move to do. It took me ages to realise that Hamilton had actually got past, because the way the camera panned back onto the challenging pack, I thought Bottas had got the move done, actually.
Yeah, I think I was the same. Once it was kind of when the safety car were all shook out and it went back to the leaders slowing down behind the safety car. That was only kind of when I realised that he actually had made it. But I think it's optimistic from Bottas that he did actually go for the move, even if he didn't make it stick. But is it a sign of things to come? Probably not.
I just feel he only won on Sunday because of Hamilton's tough weekend. I mean, Hamilton nearly got knocked out in qualifying. I mean, everything went wrong. The red flag at the wrong time, and the penalties and stuff.
It was very exciting.
Qualifying was brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Netflix curse. They were in town again covering Mercedes like they were for the German Grand Prix last season. And they didn't get the result they needed.
No, they got a win. They got a 1-3, which is where they started, other way around. On Mercedes paper, they probably should have got a 1-2 on pace for this weekend, but a 1-3 with 10-second time penalty and nearly not making it into Q3 is still okay, really. They got the win with the number 2 driver, which is what the number 2 driver is there for.
And Hamilton has to be careful as well over the next few races, because he's on 10 penalty points now. If he gets 2 more, then he'll get banned for a race. So that could be something where Bottas might, I'm just being optimistic here, where Bottas might be able to challenge him a bit more if Hamilton's a bit more cautious, maybe.
Question is, would Stoffel Van Dorn beat Bottas?
Well.
Would he?
Probably not, no.
No, I don't think so. But Max Verstappen had a very good Sunday. I mean, it didn't look like Red Bull would be kind of, it looked like they'd have a fight on their hands to reach the podium from kind of practice. They were way down, and then qualifying Verstappen came up with a monster lap to take second, got a bit of a tow from Bottas, but he kind of been a bit down before that. So I think from Red Bull, it feels a bit like a bonus second place for this weekend. They seem to do well. They seem to do better on races where they're not expected to be doing well. If we look at over the last few, Albon is obviously miles behind as usual. But from Verstappen, kind of where does this rank in his kind of performances of the season?
I'd say very high.
Well, that qualifying lap was spectacular. I do wonder if Bottas intentionally gave him a toe down to turn 2 in qualifying, because starting third is better than second. I do, because it was weird. Surely Bottas would have known that Verstappen was behind him. I know it's a bit, like, why would he do that? But starting P3 is better. But yeah, on Verstappen's performance, he couldn't really have done much more, really. He had a new power unit, which did help, but he just drove fantastic, really. Yeah.
To be, essentially, if Hamilton hadn't gone to Q3, Verstappen would have legitimately, on pace, been on pole position. He was legitimately in a Red Bull, which is on average sort of this year a second off in qualifying, from Verstappen's pace as well, not counting Albon. And then for Hamilton to be that far ahead of Bottas and like 3/4 of a second ahead of Bottas, you think, wow, that's a monster lap from Hamilton, which means this lap from Verstappen has got to be just supreme, even much better than Hamilton's lap, to actually get within that, with a half a second of Hamilton. I mean, that's got to be way better than Hamilton's lap. If he had done that lap in the Mercedes, he would have been ahead of Hamilton, I think.
No, that's an interesting debate. I don't think we want to get into that.
Think about the general performance difference between the Red Bull and Mercedes. To have that big a gap between the Mercedes, but then be that close in the Red Bull to the lead Mercedes, if I'm making sense with the way I'm phrasing it, I think it's extremely good.
Yeah,
extremely good.
He didn't get the best start and kind of was
early side of the grid, isn't he?
Yeah, and then he kind of missed his turn in for the first proper corner, first heavy braking zone, and managed to get back ahead of Ricciardo. It looked for a moment like Ricciardo could be up into third and challenging there, but kind of Renault, I don't think they would have stayed there even if they had managed it. But yeah, I think if you take out the start from Verstappen, it was perfect qualifying in race. Renault, we thought they seem to be kind of very optimistic coming into the weekend, and kind of it's been several times now where they've done well in practice and kind of seem to be able to challenge at the top, and then just not quite managed it.
I think rightly so optimistic, because I think their pace was very good. I think there's just the obvious thing of Perez being absolutely excellent this weekend, and I think if Ricciardo had qualified fourth, then maybe there could have been a bit more to it, but Perez just put in a monster lap. Ricciardo would have been fourth if he'd done his Q2 lap in Q3, so there was pace in the Renault there to be in that position. But I do think Renault are right to be optimistic with Ricciardo, because he's there in every practice session, and over the past few races he's been always in the top 5 fight. So Barcelona was the last race where Renault didn't perform, I think. Well, Ricciardo didn't perform.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they just seem to be doing a lot better, a bit like Bottas actually doing a lot better in practice but then kind of when everyone dials it up, then they're not quite there. So I'm kind of not so sure where they're at. They're obviously fifth in the constructors in a kind of tight pack with Racing Point and McLaren, so there's a good battle going on there, but I feel like maybe are they over-promising and under-delivering?
What, Renault?
Yeah.
Ooh, I don't think, if anything, I think Racing Point is the case with that, I'd say.
They're not coming into the weekend. I feel like Renault are making a lot of noise.
I think Racing Point have had the third fastest car every weekend, apart from possibly Belgium. Apart from Belgium, I think Racing Point have had the third fastest car, yet they haven't had the results to go for it, I think.
What was interesting about Racing Point this weekend was that Perez wasn't running the upgrades, because he would have been running the upgrades if Lance Stroll hadn't crashed the upgrades last race. but obviously those crashed, so they put back on Lance Stroll for the same reasons, because fair enough, he was ahead in the championship and he was ahead in Mugello. But Stroll just couldn't dial it in this weekend, and Perez was just on it like you've never seen before for the old spec car. And that's just, if Perez gets the upgrades and is even faster than he was this weekend, that's what Racing Point have got to really sort of look at their feet about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was from Perez. It was kind of quietly brilliant. He didn't kind of spend that much time, in any battles. He made an absolutely brilliant move up the inside of Ricciardo going around turn 3, and just completely blasted past him. Ricciardo got a bit kind of hazy on the exit of turn 2, but just from Perez, brilliant car positioning and being right on the limit of his traction to be able to take that place. But just one more thing on Renault is the driver swap that they tried to initiate.
Awful.
Yeah, it's how I don't know. They didn't crash into each other, but you can't really mess it up too much more than that, I think.
The driver swap was necessary. It's just, I don't think Ricciardo was expecting it to be there. I think if they'd gone on until a bit later in the track, I mean, that is the best place in the track to do it, but Ocon was a good second and a bit up the road to Ricciardo when he slammed on the brakes. So I think Ricciardo missed his braking point because of where Ocon was like having to go really far. He knew he couldn't get to the apex, so Ricciardo had to basically avoid Ocon while passing Ocon under team orders, which is just a little bit. It was a bit. I think if you'd look at that, you'd say to Ocon, go a bit slower through turn 3 and let him go for turn 5, rather than on the inside of really when you're way ahead. And I mean, it paid off for them in terms of Ricciardo got past Vettel almost immediately, but just it was a needless 5-second penalty, because that sort of took away any hope of getting closer to a car ahead. They basically had no point in going further ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if it was just a mistake from Ricciardo, possibly, because he was on the racing line after all. So I think it was just a case of maybe Ocon was a distraction because he was going that slow. Ricciardo just missed his braking point a bit.
Yeah, I think Ocon was a distraction because Ricciardo couldn't really judge him on his pace, because you can't assume that he's going at racing speed. He's slowing down quite a lot. And Ricciardo then can't just turn to the apex based on where Ocon was. He needed to allow him room, and obviously it's his teammates who needs to allow him a little bit more room. And so I think Ricciardo was trying to be cautious, but also trying to lose as little time as possible. And that just didn't work out, really, unfortunately, based on where Ocon was positioned. And the only way to deal with that would have been not do it then, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't, in the end, it kind of didn't hurt them. Ricciardo still got his top 5 minutes miles ahead of Leclerc. I think my favourite bit of it was, I think it was David Croft, but one of the Sky commentators saying, "Oh, is that a racing move or is it engineered?"
And Ocon had been a second and a half, 2 seconds up the road.
As Ocon kind of slowed down, looked 3 times in his left mirror to see where Ricciardo was coming past. But yeah, it did look a bit engineered, it's fair to say. And we mentioned him before there, but Charles Leclerc finished 6th. He had again, like Perez, quietly brilliant race, really, to bring home 8 points for Ferrari, ahead of drivers in Ocon and the 2 AlphaTauris that you would have thought would be ahead. Although Ferrari were they looked decent in practice, but how far was Leclerc overperforming his car today, or outperforming?
It was a very impressive weekend. I think, weirdly, he benefited from Vettel's crash because it meant he was able to start on the medium tyres, was it? Hard? Medium? Yeah, one of those tyres.
Yeah.
Which was the better strategy for the race, because he didn't want to be starting on the soft, as Hamilton showed. So he was able to use that and use it to his advantage, and he executed the race perfect. It was a great strategy, and he drove really well again on this weird Sochi circuit, which was a smooth way out. It seems Leclerc really shines on these kind of tracks.
Yeah, Leclerc's impressive. He can be smooth and he can be aggressive, and I think this is an entirely different track to Mugello in terms of the way the car interacts with it. Mugello was such an abrasive track, such a classic track, And in comparison to Sochi, which is traditionally a really smooth track, it is quite bumpy this year, but traditionally a really smooth kind of low energy on the tyres track. And Leclerc was fantastic in qualifying and in the early part of the race in Mugello. And in this race, he was really good as well. So these past few races have really, done wonders for Leclerc's reputation that we already knew was there, but it's really cemented it in a dog of a Ferrari.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's been kind of easy to forget that Leclerc was given such a massive deal by Ferrari and seen as the next big thing. And he's kind of, when he's in the midfield, you do lose track of that a bit, but it's drives like this where like the podiums he's got, especially at Silverstone, just kind of reaffirms that actually is one of the very, very top drivers in the sport. Someone who at the moment isn't being one of the very, very top drivers in the sport with the driver that finished 10th, Alex Albon. I'm sure Nigel's got stuff to say on this, so do you want to?
No, I've got nothing to say. It was, I'm best if I don't say anything. Other than that, it was pretty shocking.
Yeah, we're both with you on that, I think.
Yeah, he wasn't. He snuck in. He got overtaken by Gasly kind of in the last few laps, and he just wasn't. He wasn't at the races for a lot of the weekend.
He was 1.2 seconds off in qualifying, which is abysmal. He was he made a bad start, was at the back, had to pit on that one, and then was dicing with Russell and Norris, which is kind of fun. I'm sure he had a good time. This is not where he should be when you've got Verstappen finishing, 7 or 8 seconds behind Bottas at the end, and he's nearly lapped with a 5-second penalty for ignoring race director's instructions. I don't know what that is, whether he was told to just, do something and he didn't do it, whether he had to bring her a coffee or something, I don't know. But it was just, it's a weekend that just didn't work for him. I mean, last year in Sochi, he was at the back, and I think he had some engine penalties, I'm not sure, but there was a reason he was at the back, and he came through the field actually relatively okay. But he had another chance to do an Albon driver coming through the field, and he didn't do it. It was the same in Monza. He just didn't come through the field in the way we have said that Albon is better at doing. And the reason he's there is because he can sometimes come through the field, but now he's losing the streak of coming through the field. And I think the reasons that are there to defend Albon are gradually slipping away when he puts in a performance like today.
Yeah, especially after the kind of all the optimism of Mugello. It is, it's just kind of disappointing, and he'll be more disappointed than anyone. He's still not got the contract in place for next season as well, and it kind of,
when Perez finishes 4th, when Perez finishes under 10 seconds behind Lewis Hamilton in that racing point, honestly, Red Bull have got to really seriously consider him. I mean, he brings money as well, for goodness sake, Red Bull. You can have a base driver.
Albon with his tie investors.
Yeah, tie investors. What, Moose Cider? Brilliant. Get one of the richest men in the world and Carlos Slim backing you. You're much better. I think Perez would be a fantastic addition to the Red Bull team when he puts in a performance like he did today.
Yeah, I think because it felt like kind of a month ago, it kind of felt like, or even 2 months, like, Albon's kind of probably got his contract sorted, they're just waiting to announce it, or it kind of felt a lot more.
It felt like he was going to get better.
Yeah, and it just felt like kind of a matter of time. They'd got
it. Did it?
Yeah,
not to me.
From the news and the stuff that I was hearing anyway, then it kind of, it felt like, they're waiting to announce it, or that's what they're set on, and they, just need to actually get down and sign it. But it's as kind of time goes on, you can only have that time for so long, and he's got to be looking over his shoulder.
Albon can't go into Christian Horner's office in the debrief of this race, or in the week gap between now and Nürburgring. You can't really seriously go in and say, "Hello, I would like a new contract. Please, can you sign to pay me to drive your really good race car next year? I'll maybe get a point in it." Without, he's got to have guts to actually consider getting a contract now. Surely, I'm getting into the Albon bashing, crushing mindset of the club.
It's not bashing. It's just talking facts.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Nigel Chu, president of the Albon bashers.
No, like you said before, Adam, I was really hoping that Mugello would be a turning point, but it appears not to be. And like I said, after Mugello, without that Verstappen reference in the race, we don't know how good or great that was. You know, of course, everyone would rave about it because it's a podium and stuff. But it's just, yeah. I mean, he just needs one or two great weekends to at least give Horner and that something to say so he can stay in the seat next year. But even one or two performances is not enough for me, because it's 10th race, 9th race now, and he's not really done anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of. I think the problem is it's not kind of one bad weekend. You know, everyone has off weekends.
It's too many.
It's not that, and I kind of get the feeling that Horner really wants to kind of back him and be able to say, "Oh yeah, Alex is our guy," and you know that he was clearly so pleased last race weekend at Mugello, because you know he kind of had something he say, "Look, you know this is what we said." You know, he come good and all of that, and that was something they could hold up and, you know, put to all their support of him so far. But it just feels like even if you're looking for, you know, quotes putting your PR release or whatever about, oh, you know, we like Alex and there were good points from this weekend, and, you know, it was just a bad, just whatever, you know, it's just a bad strategy call or whatever, or, you know, we think just when things went against him, but it's not from this performance. There's not really much to kind of put on that. I still think he'll be in the Red Bull next year.
Horner,
at least at the start of the year.
Horner is right to support his driver, and he's right to support his previous decisions as a businessman. He's right to do that. But he's foolish if he's not going to be looking for alternative options. And I think we can all probably safely assume that there are some serious conversations about that second seat at Red Bull.
I'd hope so.
I would too.
I think it'll be interesting to see, kind of retrospectively, I don't know, when Drive to Survive comes out or whatever, kind of what he's been saying now, or kind of what his thoughts have been now, because I'm sure it will come out at some point, whether he is really, you know, oh yeah, we really like Alex, you know, he's not got the performances, but we like what he's showing us on track, which was kind of not the case with Gasly. Yeah. It was the performances, the results aren't good, but also the performances don't really give us anything to hold on to. And it feels like so far he's not taking that approach. You know, he does have some kind of better things to hold up, but it will be interesting to see kind of whether that's been the case behind closed doors and whether that continues. But I do still think he'll be at Red Bull for the start of next year. We will see.
Yeah.
McLaren finished pointless. It was a bad weekend for them. Again, another team who looked like, you know, they could be near, you know, kind of challenging top five. Sainz looked good kind of through the early part of the weekend. And then just Norris was another one involved in the battle that you mentioned that was very entertaining at the start of the race. And he was holding on to a points position at the end, but they had to pit him with his tyres.
45 lap old tyres.
Yeah. Is there kind of anything they can take out of the weekend, or do they just have to chalk it up?
It wasn't a great weekend, was it? I mean, Sainz, it was completely his own mistake there. I think he just wasn't completely thinking straight or whatever, because he just got the angle completely wrong and went straight to the wall. And that compromised Norris as well, which is why Norris was at the back. With hindsight, I think stretching the stint on the hard tyres with Norris wasn't the best idea, because he was really hanging on at the end and he had to come in with a few laps to go. So yeah, it wasn't a good weekend for McLaren after so much promise just a few races ago, you know, at Monza with Sainz and stuff. So yeah, they'll have to just pick themselves up and go again, I guess. But in fact, it was probably McLaren's worst weekend of the year, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pointless weekend, as Adam said, is really not what McLaren need or want at this stage in the season. I think they're only just still third in the constructors for Racing Point, nipping at their heels, and presumably Renault very close as well. I'd say
there's 7 points between them, I think.
Wow,
yeah, it's very tight there.
I'd say McLaren need to do well now, because Sainz has had atrocious luck in a few races to have ended up basically out of both races, Mugello included, from what is essentially a first lap mistake in both, is not very encouraging. Norris did have the opportunity for a decent drive, and he did do pretty well to get where he was, because he kept his pace on the hard tyres to when everyone else pitted to actually go ahead of them, to actually do a jump, which would have been very hard, considering how long he was eking them out for. But I think it was right to try what they did with Norris, but basically the weekend was over from lap 1. Unfortunately, they had one gamble they could have thrown, and they tried, and they were banking on a late safety car to give him a cushion, and to maybe do what they did with Gasly, which is they pit him under the very brief VSC at the end from Grosjean ploughing into the bollards on the side of the track, which is quite comical. But I mean, he had nowhere else to go, to be honest, which is a bit irritating on that term.
It's a silly rule. It's a silly rule, I think.
It's a hard rule to follow, and that's what we saw with Sainz. But Norris did a good job, but that's all we can really say. He probably did deserve a point or two, but he didn't get it.
Yeah, I think we'll come to the bollards in a minute. I think with Norris, it was actually a good drive from him, but it was just kind of such a compromised position to have to produce a good drive from. And I think it was the right decision for McLaren to do that gamble and just hope they could hold on, or something came up. I think, I don't have too much of a problem with them going for it, but yeah, it's kind of a really unfortunate way to end the weekend.
They were slower than AlphaTauri even. It was really weird, given that McLaren were at second fastest in Monza, to now be sixth, seventh fastest is very strange. And I know the midfield is very tight, but to lose that much pace, I just hope they haven't gone down the wrong way with developing the car and stuff for the rest of the season.
The pace was there. They qualified well, and the first lap just kicked them in the teeth, I think. Yeah. And I think it is just a silly mistake from Sainz on lap 1.
Yeah.
I think looking at it, he didn't really need to go onto the escape road, personally, from my memory of lap 1. I think it was a bit like, I can get a shortcut here. And which is what we've seen at Sochi quite a few times, actually, and that's why they've been so harsh with the bollards. And when you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense. And everyone else got through the bollards. Every F2 driver got through the bollards, and he didn't. And it's a bit embarrassing, but it was very tight too.
Are you saying Sainz is worse than all the F2 drivers? That's the title for the thing. But, yeah.
Well, let's see when Ferrari signed Mick Schumacher.
Oh.
Ferrari.
Yeah.
He did the same thing as Verstappen, but he just did it from a bit of a further angle. He was further around the corner, so he was having to come in on the angle.
Yeah, you're right.
To get through the bollards in the first place. But yeah, just kind of missed the bit jutting out, and that was his race over. I think on the bollards, generally, what are your thoughts on it, Nigel? You thought it was a silly rule.
I'd much rather they have. I think they just need to change the track layout. In fact, change the whole track while they're at it. It's just it's just an awkward way to penalise a driver, I think, and I think we saw in the F2, was it last year, when Jack Aitken, he crashed and he came back onto the track, so it can be quite dangerous as well. Sainz himself came back onto the track as well. Luckily, no one hit him. I think Vettel was quite close. So I don't think it's even the safest way to do it. I think they either need to change the track layout or not make going around the bollard so difficult with the wall jutting out towards the end of the like penalty zone section.
Most of the GP do it well. They do. You have to do a long lap as a penalty, and so that's basically a bit of the track is just painted off as like a little lane that you go wide in a corner, a bit like Formula E's attack mode, but as a penalty basically. And so I think on some tracks that's probably a decent idea. That I don't know how it would work with closing speed, though. That's the only issue. You'd need to work on where the braking zones are, because then a driver could just go really fast around a corner. So somewhere on this track, say somewhere like turn 4 or 5, so the driver's gone wide there, then that means that immediately they have to then basically maybe go offline somewhere else to come back on. I mean, it moves the problem on, but in a way, I don't know, it's a slower part of the track perhaps. It's not as hard. Somewhere you can feed them in where it's not on the racing line is what's required. But that's a really difficult thing to do. And if you don't do it immediately, that means on the final lap, everyone can just straight line. So it's got to be somewhere later on the lap where a driver has to then go through that. They've got to be paying attention to do that. Otherwise, they then get a penalty. So they've got a get out clause. But it's a really hard thing to do. And I think the bollards is a good quick fix to get it over and done with quickly. And it works in somewhere like Spain where they bring them back onto turn 3 because they come on the outside of the fast corner. But because this is the inside, it doesn't work. It's hard.
I was about to mention Spain because there was that year, 2 years ago now, where Grosjean kind of 3 laps in a row following up a train, and he cut like the same corner at turn 1 or 2, and just went through the bollards and carried on. It's part of the wider thing about what's best as runoff areas, because where you've got tarmac, there's always going to be that, and we saw at Parabolica. We saw at Parabolica.
Yes, have some gravel. If you just put some gravel there, get a few sacks, put it on, that'll sort the problem out. No need for any bollards or silly curves. Just put some gravel on the edge of the track.
At Mexico turn 1, it's a field there, and it's the exact same kind of thing. Like if they go wide at that corner, they're on grass, and it's really hard to come back onto the track. So there's no need to have a bollard there. And they're coming back onto the race line, but it's on grass, so they're penalised with it. And so the penalty is that they're on the grass. The penalty isn't, and they're not coming on at racing speed or anything like that. So if there's a bit of grass there, I know it's in a port in Sochi, so it's not exactly a farm, but you can put down some turf. Pretty easily. Yeah. Probably it would make it look lovely. You could put some flowers in. It look much nicer than the car park that is the Sochi racetrack.
It's going to look nicer until they blast through the flower bed and there's daffodils everywhere and it's all gone wrong.
Well, that'll give the race some drama.
I agree. Gravel is the solution for that corner, or grass.
Yeah, I think
it's a bit of a fast one for gravel, perhaps.
Yeah,
these days.
That's the only thing. Is just the safety aspect.
Although
it's not really safe at the moment.
Actually, yeah, gravel. Let's put gravel there.
Yeah, I mean there are more and more circuits going towards, as we know with Parabolica and Puon, going towards the having more
concrete.
Yeah, concrete tarmac runoff areas, which are the most effective for stopping cars and therefore the safest
because they can brake.
But rather than just skate across. But yeah, it's kind of, I guess, balancing that against how it penalises drivers for going off and for misdemeanors.
There seems to be a kind of idea that if a car is stopped, then they need to bring out a safety car, and that's fine. And there seems to be a kind of mindset of, we don't want to bring out a safety car, let's keep the race going. But we're sitting here thinking safety cars are fun, they really spice up the race, so maybe then there'll be a safety car.
But then also over the last 3 weekends, we've had 3
red flags.
Yeah, red flags and safety cars galore. So
that's true.
I don't know, but yeah, I think it's always safety has got to be paramount.
Yeah,
that's it. So the needs, I kind of like the idea of having a strip. It probably wouldn't work so well at turn 2 at Sochi, but some of this kind of having a strip of gravel on the outside, so if you go onto it, you kind of lose your line and get penalised there, but you've still got the kind of tarmac to actually slow down the car. Well, I think that's my suggestion.
We're going to Nürburgring next, so we don't need to worry about it really anymore until next year.
And that's a good segue because it is the
The
Nürburgring weekend next in 2 weeks, and will Hamilton break or equal the record there?
It'd be a much better place to do so, I think. Germany.
I think he will. I mean, this is my prediction that he wouldn't do it here when there was all the hype, and then next weekend he'll go and he'll do it.
If he doesn't do it all season, that would be really interesting.
Well, he might not win the championship if that doesn't happen, doesn't it? It's still 8 races.
That was what happened.
Yeah.
Johnny Herbert mentioned that of whether the championship was back on to Bottas. It is only 44 points the difference. So if his engine packs up in 2 races, then it's all to blame.
Which never happens anymore, it seems.
No, there is that. Bottas needs to be a bit.
The only way Hamilton will lose the championship this year is if he tests positive for coronavirus or something. Then he misses a couple of races. That's the only way.
Which we don't want to happen.
Even then,
I should say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think Bottas, like putting sand in Hamilton's petrol before it goes in or something, just like he needs to be more conniving, or like Rosberg at Monaco, he needs to do something like that to hold up Hamilton.
What was it Nelson Piquet did with Mansell? He called his wife one of the most ugly people he'd ever seen. That's what he did. Yeah. And he really got on Mansell's hate list, which is fair enough for that. So they were like putting like sandpaper as each other's toilet roll, that kind of thing. And so if we can get that kind of spicy relationship between Bottas and Hamilton, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Hamilton's in a public relationship at the moment, but Bottas might know, and we don't know when he says to whom it may concern F you, maybe he's saying it to Hamilton.
Interesting.
Whom it may concern here, we don't know. But just finally, a word. I mean, I'm just waiting for Albon to say that in a few races' time.
Yes. Come on, Albon.
Just a word on Hamilton's qualifying performance as well, because to do that under pressure, obviously to go out, every driver on the grid can do that, but I don't think many of them would be able to execute it, even in the Mercedes, of getting round in the kind of time-limited situation, having to overtake cars to make it, and then still be in a position to put in a lap time that was, took him well clear of the cut-off zone. So to me, that's kind of, probably will go a bit under the radar in great Hamilton moments because it didn't lead to a victory like, say, the Singapore quali lap did. But kind of what do you guys make of that when you saw it, and kind of how high would you rank it?
I think it's more luck by judgment that he actually got the lap.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
He had 1 second to go, and I thought he was backing off actually when because he was blocked by the Renault, and he wanted to make a gap for the Renault of Ocon, I think it was, and you kind of thought, well, he's got. I don't know what he could see. I don't know if he could see a countdown. If he thought, I've got 6 seconds to do this, I can back off a bit and give, I can take my time. I don't think he would have that kind of thing because he had Bono in his ear, basically going as stressed as Bono's ever been. If you've not heard that radio message, he is absolutely terrified that Hamilton's not going to get the lap in. He will qualify 15th and 14th, where he was. And I think Hamilton was just basically, we can say he's really calm to be able to have the confidence to be able to think that he can give himself the gap, go slow before he does the lap. But in Q2, he's got that confidence there that he thinks he's fine, but he was cutting it fine. It was by a hair's breadth that happened.
It was a good lap. It was a good lap because he got 4th. But I mean, they used to have the 1 lap shootout format, didn't they? Where you literally just get 1 lap to decide where you're on the grid. So it was just a bit like that, really. So it wasn't anything too special, I don't think.
Yeah, all the cars ahead of him in that lap. I mean, arguably, Mercedes should have gone to the end of the pit lane quicker. I mean, they had 2.5 minutes to go round, and it was simply because people were doing their usual qualifying situation that it made it slightly tight because they had 2 minutes to do it, basically.
I thought Red Bull was going to back the whole field up. I know Gasly did a bit, but I thought Red Bull were going to really to stop Hamilton getting through by waiting at the pits for a bit longer.
Verstappen didn't use
That's what they should have done.
There's a nice little Verstappen overtake on Gasly, I think,
Yeah,
pit lane.
in the pits.
Yeah, as his race engineer was saying, "Oh, you need to get in front of this train," and then he does a overtake on the inside in the pit lane.
What I kind of thought was with that, because Stroll had overheating issues and had to be put back into his pit box, and that ended his qualifying there because he could have got into Q3, who knows. But if there'd been one more car in the way of Hamilton, then Ocon would have backed up even more and so on, and Hamilton would have backed up even more, and then he would have missed it by half a second. So that's what leads me to think it was luck by judgment. He went wide.
And he made that mistake as well, didn't he? At
Yeah,
turn 2 on his outlap.
He made a mistake as well on his outlap.
I think if kind of a lot of drivers are in that situation, I don't think Bottas would make it, and he nearly was in that situation because apparently he was very close to the same track limits infringement. But to me, just kind of that under pressure just shows kind of it's one of those championship moments for him, even though it didn't actually result in a win. But not to do with that. Well, it kind of was because then he was on soft tyres.
Got pole.
And it did make a great race. But yeah, he did get
great race.
Yeah, maybe not actually.
An intriguing race.
A surprising result.
Mercedes win.
Mercedes win, but not Hamilton. We will. I think that brings us to the end of the conversation, unless anyone else has any other points they want to raise.
I have no points that I would like to raise.
Nothing that's not going to take up more than 25 minutes.
Nigel needs to get his Alex Albon fix again.
I'll just keep my mouth shut.
I didn't actually forgot to say that it had to be F1 related, so could have had anything coming up there. But we will wrap this podcast up for now. We will be back next weekend for a kind of inter-race
news podcast.
Yeah, news podcast thing. Before, and then obviously the Eiffel Grand Prix is coming up after that, and we will be doing a preview and review for that podcast.
For the race. We're not reviewing our own podcast.
Oh,
we could do.
Actually.
Other people do that.
We do, rather than doing a season review of Formula One, we do a season review of our first Winging It season.
Yeah.
And we pick up favourite moments, best overtake, when we overtake each other, and that kind of thing. So look forward to that coming soon to a subscriber box near you.
And on that note, thank you for listening, class watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye, everybody.